You know, I was happy with my field of view implementation that I showed a couple of videos ago, until my son mentioned how when he played first-person shooters, he always sought out a high ground so he could watch his enemy's movements from a distance. And it made me think that, yeah, it would be nice if we had a Heroes-like game that would approach map exploration in a similar way, where it could see tiles based on how high up they were, how visible they were in the sky. So I adapted the implementation of the field of view that I presented in that video to something that will hopefully work along similar lines to what Mr. mentioned. So the new implementation, it doesn't have the concept of the range of sight anymore. So the thorns here, they can only see one tile away, as can anybody else. And now what's restricting their view is the fact that the tiles closer to them obscure the tiles further away based on the elevation. So this tile over here obscures this tile over here because they're the same elevation as each other and as the thorns. So for the thorns to be able to see this tile here, they would need to be higher up. Okay, so as they move, they can see this tree over here, even though it's 2 tiles away, because the tree has a higher elevation than this tree over here, simply because they have a height. So vegetation has a height of 1, so the effective height there is 2 rather than 1. And as they keep moving, the same is true for that tree over there. Oh, now this is an interesting one, or 2. So they can't see what this tile is. So they can't see this tile here, but they can see the mountain behind it, because the mountain really stretches high up into the sky. It has an elevation of 3, whereas they're looking from an elevation of 1. This over here is a sea tile with an elevation of 0. So it's effectively obscured by this rock over here, rock terrain. Now this sea tile is visible even though it's not high up and it's a distance of 2. And the reason that it's visible is that essentially both of these tiles have elevation of 0, whereas the thorns are looking down on them from elevation of 1. So because they're looking down, they can see further out. Notice that this tile here is not visible because they're not high enough to see that far out. But if they were higher, if they were, instead of being on plains, if they were on a hill, they would be able to see it. And if they move closer but down, it doesn't help them. They can still see it the same distance. And then of course when they move onto the mountain, they can see a whole lot. Okay, so the way this works is that so if the thorns were in the sea at the elevation of 0, they'll be able to see this tile. To see this one, they'd have to be at elevation of 1. This one from elevation of 2, and this one from elevation of 3, which is where they are. Which is one they can't see this tile. They'd have to be even higher than that. But now let's say that we replace thorns with arcs. Now arcs, well, they all have the same range of sight because there's no longer range of sight as a concept. But arcs can fly, so they effectively have a higher elevation. So now they can see 2 tiles away, purely by the virtue of their elevated position in the sky due to their flying. And as they move, they see the same things that the thorns see, just 1 turn earlier, from basically 1 distance further away. They can see the mountain from all the way here. They still can't see the sea because it's been blocked by the tile before. And when they move onto the mountain, now they can see 1 tile further then the thorns could from the same place. They can even see this hill up here. So essentially it's them standing at a very elevated position on a mountain, looking at another elevated position, which is a hill, over lower terrain in between the two tiles. Right. So to make this work, I had to extend the concept of a shadow. So previously, the obstacles were handled or were modeled as shadows. So essentially we would have an angle where the shadow starts and an angle where shadow ends, and that would define basically a slice of the circle around the vantage point where the shadow was, which obscured anything that was behind it. Now, the way the new algorithm handles shadows is that everything has a shadow. So this tile here has a shadow, but now shadows have elevation as well. So this tile here casts a shadow at the elevation of 0. So it will obscure anything behind it that has elevation of 0 or less. Whereas this one will obscure anything behind it that has an elevation of 1 or less. So that's what I had to do to make that work. As before, actually even more than before, the logic is quite complex. It's also quite messy. I didn't try to make it efficient or streamline it. So if I do end up keeping it, I'll probably have to invest a fair amount of time in polishing it a bit. But I must say, I am happy with how it works, for the time being at least. And so is my son.